In this episode, we are going to talk about how to manage multiple projects. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is the live stream for episode 480, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you very much for joining us. For those of you who are accessing this episode recorded and not live, please remember this is a video episode. So if you're only getting audio and not the video, then please look for the play video episode link in your podcast app, or simply visit pm-podcast.com/480. So managing multiple projects. Project management is changing. Rather than focusing solely on one large project, the majority of project managers are often expected to juggle multiple projects. That a different set of challenges of its own, right? Between a greater number of project sponsors, resource conflicts, constant pressure from deadlines, it can be difficult to avoid burnout. Managing multiple projects, it blends formal project management techniques with time management and productivity tools in a step-by-step approach to consolidating our workload. So from combining schedules to prioritizing work, engaging stakeholders, managing multiple projects simply requires us to adapt our behavior and techniques to successfully work on several projects at once. And to discuss this topic with us today, we have Elizabeth Harrin joining us here from the south of London, right, in the UK?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. Welcome back for the umpteenth time, I think, right?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I know we've
it's
talked
been a-
before,
been-
but it
been
has
a few
been a while.
times. Been a few times. First question for you. What can our audience expect to learn, to take away, to hear from our conversation here today?
Well, I've spent a lot of time researching tools and techniques for managing multiple projects, and I've got some ideas that I can share with you all today, which will hopefully mean that you will find it easier to juggle your workload, which should mean that you get out of the office on time more regularly. That's the goal.
Okay. And you've actually taken something away or ahead right now, because even though you've been on the program a few times, just a quick introduction here. Elizabeth Harrin, author of 6 books, speaker, mentor, coach, Rebel's Guide to PM. Did I get that right? Rebel's
Yes.
Guide to PM.com. Yes. And she helps us, and she's already mentioned that, managing multiple projects and leaving the office on time. And when I said she's an author of 6 books, I checked this out, and as you can see here, these are all the book covers. There are 8, and which one is the same? So the same book, 2 covers or something?
The social media for project managers I wrote for PMI way
Right,
back
it's one
in the
at the
day.
top right
and
there, yeah. Okay.
Collaboration tools for project managers was the second edition.
Oh, okay. So this one here, the 2 green yellow ones. All right, got it. Okay. Yeah, but the one that we are focusing on right now is the one in the middle, managing multiple projects there. That's the topic, but not the book itself, but more the problems, the methods, the approaches, the tips, the tricks. If throughout this conversation you have a question for Elizabeth Harrin and you're joining us live on Facebook and YouTube, please don't hesitate. Put it in the chat box and we will be happy to add your questions to the mix. Here are mine. I have 9 questions for Elizabeth, all neatly placed here on one page. What, why, tricks, benefits, confidence, barriers, remote, challenges, and sushi? Exactly. So if you want to know what this sushi question is all about, you're going to have to stay until the very end. Let us get started, therefore, with the first question, the obvious one, the what question. Elizabeth, what is your experience of managing multiple projects?
Well, like many project managers, I manage multiple projects every day in my day job. But I think it got worse for me when I came back to work after maternity leave, because prior to that, I'd managed some bigger initiatives. Coming back to work part time, I got a number of smaller things. I got some team leadership responsibilities as well. And it felt like I was juggling a lot more stuff. Plus, having a new family, it focuses your mind and makes you want to manage your time in a different way so that you can be more productive with the hours that you've got available. And so I started researching what multiple projects meant in terms of my workload. And I just had to adapt, like many people do. And I did a lot of thinking, a lot of research into how to do this and how to do it better and not go crazy at the same time. So what I found was my experience of managing multiple projects was shifting everything that I've been taught about project management and trying to apply the same tools and techniques and strategies, but in a different, smarter way so that I could still do all the things that were expected of me. Because, like you alluded to at the beginning, you've got more sponsors, you've got more stakeholders, you've got more demands on your time, and everyone thinks their project is the most important and has to be done.
Challenging question for you here. Everybody who is managing agile projects is now already screaming in their heads because agile has a tendency to say you should be focused. Your project team should be focused on one single project. That means that most likely the projects and the environment that you were working in was a plan-driven, predictive environment. Is that right?
Very much so.
Okay.
Slightly hybrid. Certain teams worked in an agile with a small a. But yes, the majority of my lived experience as project manager has been a business change technology projects, but done in a planned out structured way. Not that agile isn't planned and structured, but in a more predictive methodology.
Okay.
But you've got Kanban teams, right, who
Right. Yeah.
who limit work in progress. So they'd be working on perhaps multiple tasks. I mean, some of the same time management, personal productivity ideas can still be applied to your personal workload. And I think one of the things project managers often forget, regardless of where you work, and line managers and team leaders too, is that we don't just have projects. We also have the can you organize that all day offsite meeting for the team? Can you just train this new member of staff? Can you just organize a Christmas lunch for everybody? All those things are still time drains on our time that we still have to be able to plan in and find focus moments to do.
All right. Thank you. Before we move on, have a few people here joining us. Kasima Bas is here, as always, I have to say. Chepo is here. Hi, Elizabeth. So we get people from all over the world here joining us. So after what? The next is why. So you've had that experience of managing all those multiple projects yourself. Why then did you write the book?
Because it's not just me. I I reached out to a lot of project managers. I do some mentoring and I train people, and just life in general, when you're a project manager, means you bump into a lot of other people who do similar roles to you. And what I found was that most people are in the same situation. Most people manage more than one project. And so I ran some training way back in 2019 about how do we manage multiple projects as a community, as project managers. And it really seemed to hit a nerve. And I thought maybe more people need some structure around how to do this. Because if you think about how we teach project management, even me, when I teach newbie project managers how to get their work organized, it's very much you follow the methodology in the textbook, and then that's fine. That's one project. You understand how to run one project. So all my project management training, all the prior books I've ever written about project management have been very much around one person doing one project at a time. And we've never been taught as a community of project professionals how to layer those things into our workload. Because if you're digging 10 holes, you should be able to dig 20 holes and it will take you the same amount of time. But if you're managing one project and then you're trying to manage another two projects on top of that, surely there's got to be some smarter ways of combining things and doing your work more effectively, so that you don't just have to take the whole methodology and apply it again on top of what you were doing before. So that's what I was trying to get to, is sharing some of those things that I'd learned, because it felt like there was this big piece of project management education that was missing, which is, how do you do it? Isn't it possible to do things better, faster, smarter, whatever is the word that you want to use, that doesn't rely on taking the whole life cycle and just applying it exactly the same for your next project?
You kind of sound like the Olympics, better, faster, smarter.
Yes.
All right, we have another person who's joining us from Syria. Kawai's here. Hello. And let us move on here to the next question, because so far we've only outlined the problem and kind of why you wrote the book. I think the most important question is here: what's the trick to doing it?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me this.
$60 million question here, right?
You might be a bit disappointed. I don't think there is one single trick. I think it's an attitude change. I think it's also about being able to reframe your work and influence the organization that you're in. So I think if I had a magic wand and I could give it to people listening and say, do this, do this one thing and your life would be magically easier, then I definitely would. I think it starts from having good, solid project management skills. So learning those fundamentals and being able to do that, and consider yourself a good, solid project manager, so you can understand the basics and apply those efficiently. And then it's about getting comfortable with tailoring and looking at how you can work in a different way, and thinking through, if I'm struggling with these things, how are my colleagues struggling? How can I make work better for everybody? So I think it's partly attitude. I think it's partly having good, solid project management skills, and partly being creative with your workload so that you can apply different ways to get the same things done.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. But I have a follow-up question. When you say tailoring, are we talking about tailoring the project and the methodologies you use, or are we tailoring tailoring my personal style of how I approach things, or yes to both?
I think it's yes to both, because like you teach, tailoring as part of learning how to apply a methodology is really important, because we need to be able to right size our methods for the team that we're working with, for the project that we're working with, and not just blindly follow everything. But that's almost a given these days in project management, isn't it? That you have to be able to do that. But then it's also around tailoring how you interact with stakeholders. So to give you an example, I had a meeting with a stakeholder, my project sponsor. I'd scheduled the meeting to talk about one particular project, and I was prepared to talk about one particular project. I was doing 2 projects for him, so he was my project sponsor on 2 projects, and he asked me about that other project, and I struggled because I was not ready to talk about that project, because the meeting on that project was next week. But for him, I was his project manager. I was leading 2 of his things. He was all entwining everything in his head. So I should have tailored my interaction with him to think through, what's it like being in his shoes as a senior leader in the organization? He wants an update on the things that are being delivered on his behalf that he is sponsoring. Why wasn't I ready for that? So it's about tailoring how you work with other people, and tailoring how you put your plans together so that you can be a little bit smarter and just ready for things like that, and not get caught out like I did.
Right. And then next week, let me guess, he talked about both projects again.
Yeah, but if you can do it in one meeting, why bother to have 2 meetings?
Exactly.
Just cancel one.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So we continue down the road here, and we now want to talk about barriers here. And let me start out in this way. In your book, you talk about the challenges of managing multiple projects, the skills, processes, techniques, all that help you overcome those. But what barriers might project professionals face when it comes to using those tools? Is it just simply, well, I don't know those tools, so it's harder for me to use them? Are there any other barriers that not just on top of the challenges that we have here?
Yes, I think some of the things that I write about, or that I I share like different ways of combining your project schedules, for example, so that you can see the bigger picture, are just things that you might not know, or that you might feel reluctant to use because no one else is doing it that way. And it's a challenge to apply something different and do things differently. So there's that, but that's relatively easy to get over. If you do it and it works, great. If you try it and it doesn't work, then you try something else. But when I did a survey for the book, I asked people this exact question, and 70% of people thereabouts said their projects have got dependencies on other people's projects. And that's a barrier, because you want to be able to be in control of as much as possible about your projects, so that you can influence them in the best possible way. But when you're reliant on other project managers, because there's dependencies across projects, there's a lot more communication, negotiation, and juggling to do to make sure that your project and their projects hit all the deadlines. So I think one of the things that I've noticed that is missing in many project management teams within organizations is that we often work in silos. I work with my project team, my sponsors, my subject matter experts, but I don't necessarily have a route to share knowledge or to share things with my project management peers. So being able to bring your project management community together within your organization and talk about dependencies between projects is a real win.
Is this simply a question of setting up some sort of an open space or a grassroots movement, or let's meet for a lunch and learn, or go out to coffee together?
Exactly. It's just having a team meeting, going around the table saying, what are you working on? How's it going? How can I help you? The same as you would do with your project team or a stand-up meeting, but with your
With your
peers.
colleagues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Your colleagues who are managing other projects. And so many interesting conversations have come as a result of that. I'm working on something at the moment, and I was introduced to another project manager, and I found out that she is changing some of the requirements for software, and I am procuring equipment that needs to work with the current software. So really, I should be future-proofing what I'm buying to make sure that it's going to work in the new world. And that just came out because of an informal conversation. But as an organization, if we can make those informal conversations happen and have those introductory meetings and chat to each other, you're much more likely to get those dependencies met on your projects, which in turn leads to better success results for you, because you're not being held up by other people.
Now, I know that what happened to you happens in a large company. So just to show, this happens in small companies too. Just a week ago, our marketing team sent out a newsletter about one of our products and sent people to the website, not realizing that we had just put the website under, one of those little under construction, pardon the dust, right? And even in a small company with only about 20 people here in our case, these communications, they are missing. So those barriers, people being dependent on each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that, but also having the confidence to be able to speak up about these things and understanding the situation that you're in and having that contextual awareness, what PMI is talking about as business acumen, so that you know how your projects fit into the greater ecosystem within the organization, whether you are 5 people or 500 people or 5,000 people, so that you can understand your part of the world a little bit better and break down some of those barriers between you and those other people.
So coordination between the projects.
This is
All right.
portfolio management. So much of being able to manage multiple projects successfully is to take portfolio management techniques that might be used at a more senior or different level within your organization and apply them to your to-do list.
All right, we're moving on from the barriers here to next question in the list. Confidence. Confidence. To a certain degree, it sounds like confidence is key to taking active steps in how you manage your workload, right? I mean, you can let it kill you and just, you have the weight of the world on your shoulders and you just go, yeah, I can do this. How can we project professionals around the world increase our own confidence in order to really manage these multiple projects well?
I think it's looking at what makes you feel confident as a leader and doing more of that. So it's kind of hard to give you a blanket answer that's going to work for everyone, but I can tell you what works for me, and that is being prepared for meetings. And in fact, yesterday I went to a meeting, got called on to present 3 slides that I'd actually prepared and submitted to be shared during the meeting. And I wasn't ready to talk about them because I figured people would just read them and ask questions if they had any. But I hadn't prepared how I was going to present this information if I was called on to do it. And that made me feel very unconfident, and I waffled my way through that 5 minutes and did not present myself very well. So if I am prepared for a meeting, I've got all the facts at hand, I know the data, then I can feel more confident going into a situation. So I know this is a weakness for me. I should have prepared for that meeting and I didn't. So, even people who know what they're supposed to be doing don't always do it all the time. But for me also, when I was younger, it meant when I was going into work, physically into an office instead of working from home so much, it was in how I dressed and looking at what clothes made me feel confident. So if that works for you, having a nice pen instead of one of these, if you can see that on the video, one of the, a cheap plastic pen, the same as everyone else. So it might be something very material like that you draw your confidence from, or it might be having had a meeting with your technical team and being able to explain the details to somebody if they ask, or having access to a software tool so that if you're asked a question, you can quickly access the information and pull it up onto the screen to share with everybody. So there might be a number of different things that make you feel like you are competent and confident at your job. And some of that might be training or mentoring that you can do as well. And some of it's just how you show up for work. How do you feel confident?
I was just going to say, in my personal experience, it's experience.
Yes, definitely.
Right? The experience of having managed multiple projects multiple times. Like, yeah, I've managed three projects at the same time before. I can handle this. Being thrown into that situation where your sponsor suddenly wants to talk about the other project and you were not confident. They say you can recognize a experienced project manager by looking at their backs and looking at all the knives that are sticking in there, right? All the mistakes that we have made, all the failures that we have had in the past, that builds up, right? Herbert Gonder said, "I never fail, I learn." Right?
That's a
And
really great
project management
attitude.
colleague of mine. So don't look at anything that happens as a failure. Look at it as something that, oh, I just learned something here. Not going to happen to me again in the future.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
also about recognizing, and this comes with experience, that the first few weeks on a new project are going to make you feel unconfident and lacking in skill because it's a brand new topic with brand new stakeholders that you've never worked with before. Perhaps you're in a new job, perhaps you're in a new project within your old job, but your team is different. And that's one of the things we do a lot as project managers is move between different subjects and apply our expertise to different areas. And so we always have to keep coming back to, we are the experts in the process. We are the glue that holds the team together. We don't have to be experts in each different subject matter. I don't know anything about unit testing, but I know we need to do it. I don't know anything about the financial model that drives our actuarial software, but I know somebody who does. And it's bringing all of that together. And that's how we add value as project managers. And we can draw confidence from knowing that we have that particular skill set.
Right. We have a question in the chat.
Ooh.
Yeah, from Davila Cruz. What is the best organization to manage multiple projects, Matrix or Productized?
In my experience, most people who are managing multiple projects are doing so in a matrix environment.
But is it the best?
Is it the best?
Structure to do it?
The best, most efficient team I've ever worked in was a projectized environment. In fact, I've done that a couple of times, and both very clear goals, very clear division of time, and clarity around what it was we were achieving, and that worked really well. But both of those projects that I've been involved with were individual projects, admittedly with multiple different work streams, quite big initiatives.
Right. And so the project manager is probably assigned to only one at a time, right? Because it would be very difficult to have a humongous project and then another humongous project as well and manage both.
Or you're working at program management level and you've got a number of different work stream leads or project managers working with you.
Yeah.
So It'd be interesting to hear your experience, Davila, but I would say that in a projectized environment, if you have a team working for you, it's more likely that you'd be on a larger single project, or perhaps a number of smaller initiatives that hang together. Perhaps you're working on a particular client account, or
Hmm.
perhaps you're working within a function, delivering projects specifically for that function. So there's a lot of synergies. I hate using the word synergies. I promised. I always end up finding a way to slip it in to every conversation, but it just feels like such a buzzword. But there's probably in those environments lots of different things that help link those projects together that make it easier for them to run as multiple projects. The more challenging environment is that matrix structure where your subject matter experts are working on 5 different things, you're working on 5 different things, and you've just got to juggle everybody's time with very little authority to get them to do anything.
Yeah, I've done both. I've worked in projectized situations, and I've worked in matrix organizations, and I've also worked in a client project situation, so where you sell the project management as part of your job, so more like a project business type organization. And they all have their own challenges. Obviously, if you have 5 projects and you have external clients and they're paying you, they expect, right? So that the expectation is much higher there. If you are in internal and you have multiple projects that you manage in a projectized environment, like you said, it's much cleaner because in most of those cases, the teams are fixed, and you as the project manager, you do the switch. You go from project 1 to project 2 to project 3, but it's not, the people stay in these projects. And then in the matrix organization, I mean, anything goes, right? You walk into project A and you have 3 people there that are going to be in project B 2 hours later on the other project. So you're always doing that switch. I don't think there is a ideal. I don't think there's a best. Again, I
I
think it's a
agree.
matter of you personally, how you handle it, how you manage it, and how you can adapt to this particular situation.
And the size of the project as well. So it is very
Yeah,
much down to
yeah,
finding a
and
structure that works for
yeah.
the organization.
Cruz de Villa also says, as a follow-up, we have to consider whether we have dedicated or shared resources. Obviously, in a projectized environment, you're oftentimes agile as well. They're oftentimes dedicated, whereas in a matrix, they could be anywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. Working with dedicated resources is definitely easier.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've seen work well is where people who have a role that needs to be not dedicated also allocate 20% of their time for dedicated work, or just generally to hold for project
Yeah.
work. So they can do 80% of their time doing their day job and anything else that comes across their desk, but that they've got a ring-fenced proportion of time. So they're kind of hybrid, not dedicated, but also dedicated. So it's very flexible. It's whatever works for you and whatever you can get
All
your
right.
organization to achieve.
Yeah, and I hope that answers the question in its entirety. All right. Talking about questions, we are halfway to sushi. First 5 of 9 questions here, a little bit more than half, actually. We're done. And we're moving on to the benefits. Now, we hear a lot about the importance of good stakeholder engagement, right? But are there any real benefits for us managing multiple projects?
I think so. I think stakeholder engagement, there's a whole chapter on it in here, because this is
Wait,
one of
put
the
it up again.
biggest areas.
Put it up
Oh, right,
again.
sorry.
There we go, everybody.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
Because there's a whole chapter, because it's so important. So stakeholder engagement is obviously important for all project managers, regardless of what you're doing. But when you're having to juggle more stakeholders, more project sponsors, more people who are making demands on your time, you need to really think about how you do that, how you spend your time and who you spend it with. Because as much as we'd love to do the same level of engagement for everybody, they're not all worthy of the same level of attention, because they have different influence over the project outcomes, and also just don't have enough hours in the day. So you have to prioritize people. So I would say the benefit for people managing multiple projects to focus on the stakeholder side of things is if you can make it easy to work with you, you will hopefully get greater levels of engagement and participation from your stakeholders, which should mean less chasing up. Because one of the big things that comes out time and time again when I speak to project managers is we spend an awful lot of time chasing other people about stuff they haven't done. So if we can build great working relationships with them, if we can make it easy for them to do their tasks, we're cutting down our own workload, because hopefully we're making it so we have to chase them less. And that gives us more time to do other things that perhaps add a little bit more value.
Mhm. One thing that I could also see as a potential benefit is the fact is a personal benefit, really. If you are managing multiple projects that are not in exactly the same line of things, let's say you're managing an IT project and a logistics project and, I don't know, a marketing project at the same time, that means you personally are going to learn an enormous amount about those three areas as well as your company. Right? You're suddenly starting to see how these three areas, marketing, IT, and logistics, work together. How it would benefit the marketing project if the marketing team had a better understanding of how logistics work, and the IT department really needs to talk to, right? So you are starting to make those connections for yourself and for your organization. Most of us, however, if we have multiple projects, we are, a little bit, we're put into a certain track. It's like, you're an IT project manager, therefore you do this, and you're logistics, therefore you do that, and don't talk to each other. That's not really how it is, but yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of truth in that. I think that there's even IT projects, even logistics projects, you still have to reach outside and talk to procurement or finance or legal or internal comms, and understanding how all those different pieces play together in your organization makes a big advantage to your career, because you see things that other people in the organization in line jobs, in department functional roles, don't see. And that's a real asset for you in terms of understanding how the organization works and where you might want to go with your next steps in your career. And it adds to that business acumen, which means you can have conversations using business language to the stakeholders who are senior leaders in the organization. They don't care that this particular task is 75% done. They care about shareholder value or business benefit or return on investment, and the bigger picture. What is this doing? How do we deliver our value proposition as an organization? And you can talk in the words that they would understand, or talk in words that are more meaningful, because you see all of that.
Yeah, so don't look at it as oh my God, they're assigning another project to me. Now I have three. Don't look at it as something devastating. Look at it as a challenge that you can learn to master, and look at it as a learning opportunity for you to grow and learn more about these various parts of your company. Right. We're moving on to the next question. We're going away from the benefits, and we're doing this particular interview here in the remote way. So the question obviously becomes here about remote projects as well. How does remote work change how multiple projects need to be managed? Because we suddenly have stakeholders that are not in the same building. We have team members that are all across the world, and we're doing it for, multiple projects.
I think the remote world has made it harder, because so much of project management when I was in the office was me creating opportunities to bump into the stakeholders when I needed updates. So this all comes back to, how do we work with our colleagues? How do we get their involvement in projects? How do we build trusted working relationships by helping them do their jobs better and by showing up? And if they can't see us, or if we don't accidentally bump into them at the coffee machine or in the kitchen or by the elevators, we don't have those opportunities anymore. So we have to be more organized and use the time that we do have with our stakeholders more wisely. And this again comes back to those looking at portfolio management principles and taking those and applying them to your own workload, so that you have put your work into buckets. And when you find a stakeholder, when you have time booked with somebody, you are talking to them about all of your projects or all the things that might be relevant to them, because you can see that big picture of how they interact with your whole ecosystem of projects, and you can use that time wisely with them. So I think that's one thing. And I think also it affects the types of projects that we are implementing. So much more focus now on how do we deliver training virtually, for example, for all the projects that we're doing. It wasn't that long ago that when I was planning training, working with one of my colleagues, project managers, who was planning the training for the software I was delivering, we had everyone show up and sit in a classroom and learn that way. I mean, that's recent recent memory, and we wouldn't do that now. So a lot of the ways that we lead our projects is also different because of the remote ways of working, and we have to think about how we can do that in an engaging way, because people have got a lot of demands on their time and a lot of pop-up messages in MS Teams or Google Drive, whatever it is that you're using. So things like data protection, information governance, we need to be baking all of this into how we do projects, because it's so technology led now, even for some of the things that in the past might not have felt very technology led.
Hmm. Yeah, the story you just talked about with the training, it's kind of BC, isn't it? Not
Yes.
before Corona, right? Everything has changed at that point, right there. I'm going to take us one back just briefly here. So we're talking about remote right now. I'm going to take us back to benefits, because Cruz de Villa put in another one, benefit, saying that optimizing the use of resources could be a benefit. I thought about this for a moment. I saw it pop up about a minute ago, and I was thinking, how is that a benefit?
Oh, it is.
Potentially, if you have the same resource working on two of your projects, then you have an opportunity to what is it called, resource leveling, making sure that that person isn't over or underworked, because you suddenly can go, okay, right, you're finishing up the work over here on project A, which means you're going to be dropping and you have availability. Therefore, let me ramp up project B and give you more over there. If you are at that level of managing the team, or somebody on your project does that. So that's kind of how I could see optimizing the use of resources. Do you see any other ways of
Yes.
doing that?
One of the things that people tend not to do when they're managing multiple projects is combine risk. And resource management is one of the areas where we add risk to our projects, because people are also working on multiple projects themselves. So with that, let's think about someone who's going on holiday. They're going away for a week. They're a resource on one of your projects. You think, well, they've got one task to complete during that week while they're away, which is easy for them to catch up on. It's not going to affect our critical path. We'll just let that slip, and that resource can do it when they're back. But if that person is working on 3 of your projects and working on somebody else's 3 projects, they've now got 6 projects worth of work, a whole week's worth of work to catch up on when they're back. So if you can look at how do we what does that look like? What risk does that present to me and my workload and my colleagues and their workload? And then think through, how do we optimize the use of that resource? We can't say don't go on holiday, but we can say let's train up another person so they can cover for you. Let's reorganize our project schedules so that you're not the critical pinch point and you're not overwhelmed in that week that you come back. How can we reframe what you're doing, or structure the schedules in a different way? Just having awareness and visibility of these problems allows you to tackle them in whatever way you feel is the most appropriate. But often we don't even have visibility, because we don't see people's resource schedules across multiple projects. We don't have them on our risk log, and we don't combine all the information from all our different projects. And then we end up with a big drama when someone's off.
All right. We went back to the benefits. We've already talked about remote work there. But even though we're moving on to challenges, one more question to go before sushi, everybody. One more question to go before sushi. So we're staying with remote work. And this time I want to know, what are the biggest challenges involved in managing multiple projects in a remote environment? Is it the technology, or is it something else?
I think it is technology, but I think there's probably greater challenges than being remote. Because when I asked people this for the survey for the book, one of the biggest challenges that they came back with was not having clear priorities and not being able to understand what other people thought were priorities for them, and not having transparency across their whole workload. So that level of not knowing exactly what they should be doing, not knowing what order they should be doing it in, because strategically that's not been defined or set. So they're left to their own devices to have to work it out themselves. And that's burning people out because we're trying to do everything because we're considering everything a priority. But actually, it can't all be priority, surely. So I think the biggest challenge, while technology and remote working is definitely up there, in the last few years, we've kind of got good at that or better at that. What we haven't got better at is setting priorities, being realistic about what's achievable in the hours that we've got, sticking to priorities, or having that whole portfolio view of what is in my workload. How many hours do I spend on each of these projects per week? Does my manager agree with that? And if not, how are we going to have an adult conversation about what I stop so that I can work on some other higher priority things? And it's that level of transparency across someone's individual to-do list, and then for a manager across a team, that I think is really lacking in a lot of organizations.
Mhm. So we're talking about challenges of remote work. And
Mm.
one of the challenges that I have come across, and by a sheer coincidence in the last 10 days, I read an article about how to overcome it. And we're using air quotes here, how to overcome that challenge is creativity, in particular brainstorming. Project work is creative work. You always have brainstorming sessions. You always have to meet with people and discuss and come up with ideas and create lists of things to do and all that. And when you are using a remote tool like we're using right now here, and you're on camera, and you're expected to sit there and be focused and do all of this. I personally, I have a tendency to pace when I'm creative, right? The researchers of that paper said, very simple way of resolving that problem: turn your cameras off. Now you
Mm.
don't know that I'm standing up. I'm literally standing up at this point. You can't tell that I'm standing and that I'm pacing and that my mind is going into overdrive for this brainstorming session that we are working on right now, right? Otherwise, you'd be seeing this and you'd go, well, that's pretty rude. What is he doing? Right? So yes, go off camera if you're doing brainstorming, because project work is creative work, and that can help you solve that challenge or of overcoming that sort of the sticking point of people just always having to look at the camera and being present.
That's a really great tip.
All right, the moment everybody has been waiting for.
I hope it's worth it.
Sushi? What? So,
Sushi.
in the book, you talk about having sushi, spaghetti, or side dish workload of projects. Let me repeat that: sushi, spaghetti, or side dish workload of projects. Would you please explain?
Yes, I will. What I was trying to do with that analogy is categorize how projects make up your workload. So if you're managing multiple projects, you've probably got a workload that falls into one of those three descriptions of what those tasks and that workload might look like. So a sushi workload would be where all of your projects are individual, they stand alone, they're tiny little separate pieces of sushi on a plate, and they don't really have dependencies on each other, and you can work on them each individually. So they're not related, they stand well on their own, and project work is the main part of your job. You're managing multiple projects, but they all don't really interrelate with each other. If you have a spaghetti workload, it's much more like a giant bowl of spaghetti. Maybe there's some meatballs thrown in there as well. And it's, again, the majority of what you're doing all day is project work, but all your projects are mixed up and interrelated in some way. So maybe they're all for a particular client, or maybe they all use the same technology, or you have a particular process that you implement and you go around different clients and implement it, or they're all using the same resources, or they all have to be done by Christmas. It could be any particular deadline or any particular type of thing that makes them all similar and overlap in certain ways. And so you might want different strategies to manage those because they're very interrelated. And if you have a side dish, which is the third one you said, projects are kind of the extra stuff that you do. You have a day job, and then projects are the side dish to that, which means you're trying to get your day job stuff done and deliver on those responsibilities while trying to manage one or several projects on the side, which can be really challenging because we all know project work is a little bit up and down some of the times, and you think something's small and then you uncover something and it becomes a lot bigger. So if projects are the side dish to your day job, you might need, again, more conversations with your manager about how much time you want to allocate to those, and make sure that you are ring fencing time, making sure that you're working with the right kind of stakeholders to help you get all of that stuff done. Does that explain what sushi workloads are all
It
about?
does. The moment you explained what sushi was, I was like, of course, yes, nicely separate, all intertwined spaghetti. And then the side dish, yeah, you have your main plate, that's your day job. And then you have those small or big side dishes around the plate that you need to work on as well. Yeah, that makes total sense. Where are you at the moment? Are you at sushi? Are
Oh
you
my
at
goodness.
spaghetti? Are you at side dish? Or are
I think I'm probably spaghetti with with a side dish of something else. Garlic bread.
yeah, and to
Most
explain,
of
the
my projects.
spaghetti would be your own company, that all the things that you're doing, and the side dish is the additional project that you've taken on for one of your clients. Is that
I'd
the
say
way
it was
you
the other
see
way
it?
around, actually. I'm working with a client at the moment, and several projects, but they are all very
Oh,
basic and
okay.
very, very similar resources. And so the work that I do, writing and teaching and mentoring and all of that stuff, is feels like a side dish to that.
All right. And that was it for the sushi. Okay. That brings us to the end here of managing multiple projects. What's your experience? We talked about why did Elizabeth write the book? What's the trick to getting it done? Then what are the barriers that we have? How can we project managers get more confidence in doing this? Are there any benefits for us as project managers to actually managing multiple projects? Spoiler alert, yes, there are. What about remote work? How does that change multiple projects? What are the challenges of doing that? And then the types of project work that you do, sushi, spaghetti, or side dish. Elizabeth, thank you very much for all this. In the beginning, I asked you, well, what are we going to talk about? Let me close with this here. What are the takeaways? What are the 2, 3 things maybe that you would like our audience today take away with them and maybe start applying on managing their own multiple projects going forward?
I would say think about what is the entirety of your work? What does your personal portfolio look like? All the projects and all the other stuff that you're expected to do, and get clear visibility about that. That is your starting point for being able to manage and control the work, is understanding what it actually is. You might be surprised at what's on that list when you sit down and write it. And the second takeaway I would focus on is what we were talking about with stakeholders. People are so important to getting projects done. So invest your time wisely in building great relationships with people and creating a culture where work is streamlined, where things feel like they are fluid and easy, and then hopefully you will be able to get out of the office on time, at least some of the
Wonderful.
time.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Before I say goodbye, however, I want to bring this slide back up here. Wait, I need to actually bring it up. There we go. Don't forget, folks, this conversation today was all about Elizabeth Harrin's book, Managing Multiple Projects, how project managers can balance priorities, manage expectations, and increase productivity. I've seen it on Amazon. It's probably available in every good bookshop around the world. How many pages does it have, Elizabeth? Roughly, yeah.
250,
Let's see. Wait,
215.
hold it up, hold it up. Let's
Yeah,
see it, and then let's
215 pages
okay,
with
215
some
pages.
really nice pictures.
Really nice
So,
pictures. All
like
right,
that.
perfect. Okay, wonderful. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today. Once again, for having been here on the program. We all appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, and I hope people took away some useful tips from that.
Yeah, and a special shout out, obviously, to Cruz de Villa for joining the conversation and sending the questions and comments that we've answered here. Thank you, everybody. All right. In closing, please don't forget, please do visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, transcripts, PDU information. Yes, you'll get PDUs for watching this particular interview here with Elizabeth Harrin. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this meme here with Dr. Evil from Austin Powers and his team of baddies. Let's give them multiple projects at the same time. Ho, ho, ho. Okay, I'm not that good of an actor there, but you know what they do after they are really mean. So I hope that today's discussion has shown you how to beat Dr. Evil and his evil ways. Until next time, everyone.